Are you looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the PrizePicks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, PrizePicks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/bluewire and use code BLUEWIRE. That's code BLUEWIRE at prizepicks.com/bluewire for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Kirk Your Enthusiasm. I'm joined once again by my longtime friend, Bobby Karalla. We are recording on Tuesday night, June 14th. It's about 8 o'clock. I've been kind of pestering him for a few weeks just because I wanted to talk. I'm not ready to let go of the season. Bobby, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, man. Just enjoying the off season so far, and drafts around the corner, free agency after that, summer league after that, and next thing you know, it's media day. So I'm trying to enjoy every second I can get.
So do you actually, I want to circle back to this stuff, but one quick question, because I will forget. Are you going to summer league?
I don't believe so.
Dang it.
I don't believe so. Yeah. Yeah. Because we have some plans for summer league, and if we're able to pull it off, it will require me to be here for that. So but we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
Well, yeah. All right. Interesting. So I wanted to have Bobby on because one of the challenging things about being a modern sports fan is that you're inundated with like tons of information. And what results in that is that it's so easy to just move on to the next thing. And despite being a well-founded and I have a reputation of being a grump for a very good reason.
You do.
I am not ready to let go of this year because, I remember podcasting with Josh early on in the season and him just saying, like, I want to get to the playoffs. I have a good idea of what this team is. Let's get to the playoffs and see what they do differently. And it's so funny. And he's even talked about this where he's just like, I did not know what this team was. And we just had such a lengthy, like, it was a great season. It was very much like a story where there's just elements of things going wrong, things going right. And then right before the Mavericks were poised to get into the playoffs, something else went awry, only for, the hero and Jalen Brunson to rise up. And then what do you know? They're all the way in the Western Conference Finals. And I mean, I want to say Nico Harrison said something like this in his media, like the whatever it's called, the exit interviews, where he said, if you would have told me that we were going to be in the Western Conference Finals, I wouldn't have believed you. And my I don't know about you, but when I went back to the start of the regular season, I was really just hoping for like a second round team. That was my personal goal for a team in which I have no control over. Do you remember what your sort of like, your expectations were back then? What were your hopes?
Yeah, I do remember my expectations, and receipts of that exist on the internet, Kirk.
Ooh, I love it.
Yeah, my expectation, or I guess definition of what a successful season would have been, would be ideally getting home court in the first round, but certainly avoiding the play-in and then winning a first-round series. I think they had to do that. They had to learn how to close out one opponent one time. They had 2 cracks at it against the Clippers last year, and obviously, they kind of let one go in Dallas, and then Game 7 it turned into an ugly one. So, they needed to learn how to get over the hump, and they also needed to avoid the play-in, and it was looking pretty nasty there for a while. I mean, like even into that like late March, it was like they played Minnesota, Houston, Minnesota again, I think, and then Utah was like sandwiched in between there somewhere. It was a really tough schedule right before the end of the year, and they needed to win a lot of those games in order to avoid falling down to 7th, and they did. And they ended up facing Utah and hosting a Game 1, and it was awesome. But that was I guess that was my benchmark. Home court would be fantastic, and then closing a series, and then they would have to achieve all the other accompanying sort of milestones and reach the benchmarks that are required to do those things. So, like, in order to be a home court team in the West, you're going to have to win 50-something games. You're going to have to get way better on defense. You're going to have to play way better in the clutch. You're going to need other guys to step up and all that stuff. And so all of those sort of goals are implied. But yeah, I mean, just benchmark was home court, avoid the play-in, and win a series.
I like that. The home court one is fun because I think it's easy to forget that it's just been a long time since the Mavericks had won a home, like when you play, in the bubble and then you play the dang Clippers, they didn't win a home playoff game for many years. So it's like the home court and the home court win was it was extra great. But I want to rewind kind of all the way to the start, maybe even, going back to about 12 months ago. So things are, let's just call them political terms. The Mavericks were a change-in at this point of last year. Where a lot happened in a short period of time between coaching staff changes, front office changes. And I remember my earlier takes were skeptical, to be kind, mainly because of history. And what ended up happening this season was really, really neat, but it was not a smooth path. There was, our wonderful superstar in Luka Doncic not really showing up in the best of game shape. And then there were, just sort of kinks in adjustments and roles and slight adjustments in style. Jalen Brunson made his way to the starting lineup. Brunson also, by the way, doesn't get near enough credit for sort of keeping the team afloat those first 30 games because he was he might have been the most consistent player past Dorian Finney-Smith all year. And I love.
I remember they were down 25-5 against the Spurs, like in the 3rd game of the year, and he came in and like single-handedly launched like a 20-0 run. It was crazy. It was wild.
It was crazy because and granted the nerds, the non-stat people hate this, but like after like the first 10 or 12 games, like the Pythagorean win expectation was that the Mavericks should have been like 3-9 or something based on
it was
point
not
differential.
Great. Those were not great times.
Those were not great times, but then, it's like we're kind of slogging through a tough November, and then the COVID outbreak hits. And the COVID stuff is going to be something for like a history book at some point, because Seth Partnow, my buddy, who now does like high level stats for, I can't remember the name of the company, but it's like the data for December there, it's like an earthquake. Like it's just that it's so out of whack with people playing weird minutes, and the Mavericks just kind of kept going. Like they didn't play bad, but they didn't play good. And then I've mentioned this multiple times. You and I've talked about this. My personal turning point for me, and I look back on this, was I was sitting in one of your Twitch streams, and I want to talk about these at the end because I want to talk about what y'all were hoping to do and things like that. But I'm sitting in one of your Studio 41 Twitch streams where you were doing this wonderful. It was like a social studies presentation where you were walking people through the math about what happened when the Sacramento Kings and what was the guy's name?
Chimezie Metu.
Chimezie Metu.
The shot heard around the world.
Where you whip out this astoundingly dorky but accurate. I give you credit for this. I am never nice to you. Where I was like, you break out this fantasy football analogy where you're like, you have to trust the process behind what you are going for as a team. And letting Chimezie Metu shoot that shot was better process than De'Aaron Fox scoring a layup. I just remember you saying this. And I remember being mad, and I remember thinking, you know what, Bobby is wrong. Because that's why I remember it, honestly, because I was like, Bobby's wrong. Hell with this Bobby guy. But in the Mavericks, 2 games under 500 at that point. I want to say 15 and 17, something like that. After that, things changed. And I don't know what changed. I'm curious. This is what I want. I'm working towards the question, I swear. Things changed, and then they won against the Kings again on New Year's Eve. And then they proceeded to win. They proceeded to lose, I think, 10 more times in the regular season after that. It was something bananas. What do you think changed after that? What was the switch?
Dude, I don't even know. I couldn't tell you. I mean, on the one hand, the turning point of the season was when Jalen Brunson became a full-time starter. On another hand, a turning point of the season was when the Mavs signed Theo Pinson, of all people. And then, of course, there's the KP trade in there, later on. But the real turnaround began January 2nd. I guess really December 31st is when they bounced back and beat the Kings without Luka. And then a couple days later, he came back in OKC, and it was all over after that. I mean, from that point on, in the calendar year of 2022, the Mavs lost 5 home games in the regular season. They had a very road-heavy schedule at the early part of the year. And then January, they just spent the whole month of January basically at home. Had all these big wins against like the Warriors and the Bulls and a bunch of these other really good teams at the time, the Nuggets. And they just built some. I don't know. I mean, the bench wasn't always having a blast, like they were in the playoffs. The fun time started really in that January stretch. And I think, some of it was because Luka was out. And, we kind of saw that mirrored later on in the year whenever he missed those first few games against Utah. Whenever your star is out, especially whenever you're running as heliocentric a system as the Mavs do, like when Luka's just gone, everybody else needs to do more, and it wasn't just Luka that was gone. Reggie Bullock missed some time. They had like 3, 4, 5 guys out with COVID, given like key minutes to Brandon Knight on Christmas night in Utah and like Charlie Brown and all these other guys. So everybody needed to step up. And then, once you get over that initial shock of like, well, Luka's not here and he's not coming back anytime soon because, his leg turned like 4 different directions in November, and now he has COVID too, and it's Christmas. Once you get over that initial shock and you start winning some games, then you have all the confidence in the world, and Brunson was fantastic. Let's not forget, like Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock both just got off to just terrible shooting starts. Bullock in particular, through the month of November. I mean, he was just really bad, and in December he struggled too. And then those 2 guys finally heated up, and Maxey started figuring it out, and Dwight regained his bounce, and Jalen started looking like a stud. And, KP was rock solid through those couple months. And so whenever Luka came back, it felt like they were ready for liftoff, But I was a little, at the beginning of the year, I wasn't necessarily skeptical so much in J-Kid's like ability to coach a team. What I was more skeptical in was the player's ability to, and desire, I guess, and just simple skill level to buy into what he wanted to do on defense. He said after that, it was like they lost to New Orleans or Washington or something early in the season, and he said, we're not built to play defense. I mean, he's right. They're not built to play defense, but they all eventually bought in, and it really clicked. And I mean, that was that. So, I was thinking that like the big any sort of uplifting through a new coaching hire would just be straight up because of the power of positive thinking. But it was more than that. They're a tactically sound defensive team now, and everybody found their confidence and found their rhythm without Luka. And when he came back, I mean, it was just, they were off to the races, and it was amazing. I mean, they had, outside of that 06-07 team, and outside of the year they won the title, they went on some run where they won like 20 out of 21 or something that season. They have not had like a 30 to 40 game stretch of basketball like they've had, from January into like mid-March. I mean, they've never done that before, ever, in franchise history. I mean, they played some of the best basketball that the Mavs have ever played. And so it was a blast to watch, man. And I don't know who to credit. Luka obviously, but I mean, I just said 50 guys' names. Like, every single player contributed to it too, which is so beautiful, especially given kind of the narrative surrounding this team for so long until this year.
I like that. I like that a lot. It's so funny. There's a couple of elements which I think could be dove into to discuss, but are ultimately like, well, did this happen because this player left, or did this happen because this player got injured? And since we ultimately can't know, I don't want to be a downer for once in my stinking life. And I will
This is
say
big,
that,
Kirk. This is really big.
well, yeah, and tell Skin Wade for me, please. And ask Mark Follow to unblock me. It was, I think if you were to add, I'd be curious about this. Somebody will do this for me because I'm lazy. But if you were to add up the post January 1st records for the Mavericks from January 1st to the end of the season in 2020, 2021, and then January 1st to the end of the regular season in 2022, the Mavericks won a ton of games these past two seasons following up on January, which is really, it's probably a scheduling quirk, but it's just sort of something that I'm very interested in, because one of the analogies that got thrown to me, you did this complex fantasy football analogy that I love. Somebody once referred to Luka Doncic as Derrick Henry. And I
That's good.
just love it, because if you're not a football person, if you're an overseas Slovenian fan, Derrick Henry is an American football player who's one of the biggest players at his position, and just like Luka. And over time, he gets better as the game goes on. And so I make that comparison because I think Luka plays better with each passing month, but also becomes harder to deal with as teams get tired. And it was really something watching him come on down the stretch. I was at this game in January, I think, Oklahoma City game, where it was one of the first games I remember where he really made an effort to get to the rim. And it was like he shot a ton of free throws. He was just going time and time again. And it was like, that was the game where everyone kind of decided and or realized that the path forward is Luka's going to have to take a beating, because we've talked about it before. We'll talk about it for the rest of his career. To me, one of the most underrated elements of the Luka Doncic experience is how freaking strong he is. And with that strength comes sort of a physical beating that few other players take. It's not unlike Shaq or Giannis, but it's just sort of in that range. And man, is it cool to watch when he gets going. And it just, I don't know. I've been thinking about that the past couple of days as we kind of get ready to watch Luka play in the World Championship qualifiers, and then probably in Eurobasket down the line. But what kind of happened following the Mavericks? Tim Hardaway went down against Golden State, and it one theory that I've heard, and you don't need to comment on this, but was that the Mavericks sort of figured out that they might need one more guy who can dribble. And that trading for Spencer Dinwiddie was, while it wasn't about Porzingis, it was also about like how this team needs to be constructed. And that trade, I remember I hosted a green room, right? And you've seen these things from time to time. Normally I get like 150 to 300 people live. Like, that's it. In the middle of a Thursday, there were 900 people so mad.
Oh, people were fired up. I listened to y'all's podcast, your reaction pod. It was epic.
I was shocked.
It was an epic pod.
Like 2 years of people getting mad at Porzingis, me included, only for everybody to be like, how could they trade Porzingis?
Yeah.
It was wild. It just shows the kind of the dichotomy of a fan. But after that, like, things somehow ratcheted up to a whole different level. And I sort of think, like, number one, not only is it really cool that we get like meaningful March and April basketball now, that stretch, particularly that Boston-Brooklyn stretch, and granted, game winners help, but that was like one of the coolest stretches of Mavs fandom probably since the last time the Mavericks made the playoffs. Dude, like that sort of that road game stretch. They only went 3-2, but it looked like they could go 0-5.
Yeah. No, I mean, when they went to Golden State, they went to Brooklyn, they went to Boston, like in like a week and a half. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then they won games at home against Utah during that stretch too. Like they couldn't lose. They could not lose,
What do you? I don't.
except for to the Knicks.
Which is hilarious. What do you like? Like, what are your sort of Spencer Dinwiddie impressions? Like, I don't know what to make of him as a player because it seems like the range of sometimes he's just not great, and other times he scores 30 points and looks like a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, it was a wild ride with him this season because he started off so red hot, and it was cool. Obviously, like I'm happy when the Mavs win and when Mavs players do good basketball. But I knew that he wasn't going to shoot 50% from three forever and like 60% from the floor. And so you're just waiting for kind of the drop off to happen. And unfortunately, it did happen like right at the end of the regular season and into the playoffs against Utah. And he was kind of up and down, I guess, for throughout most of that series. Had some moments, but I mean, when he popped off, he just popped off, and that's kind of that's the nature, I guess, of having a really good sixth man. Thinking back to like Jason Terry, for example, and these other guys that have come off the bench for the Mavs over the years, Jerry Stackhouse, same thing. Sometimes you got it, and sometimes you don't. And if you don't have it, then it's about what else can you do to help the team. And I think just like for Spencer, the ability to get to the basket, turn nothing into 2 free throws, and then also, be 6'5" with long arms on defense is super duper important because like you said, I mean, they really needed another ball handler so badly, especially once Brunson got bumped up to the starting lineup because, when he or Luka were out of the game, that's fine, but it's really, really hard to play, extended periods of basketball with like against Atlanta, for example. Remember that Hawks game? Luka and Brunson were both in foul trouble. That was before the trade. And so they were relying on like Trey Burke and I think Sterling Brown and Frank got in the game too. And it's like you have to have somebody else. You just have to. And Spencer filled in. So I mean he was amazing, obviously. I mean, I can't think of another non-all-star kind of caliber player that was traded at the trade deadline that has made a bigger impact on his team ever, like in NBA history. And now I'm youngish, I'm 31, so I don't, remember what was going down in the early 90s or anything. But
Sure.
I mean, Spencer Dinwiddie, by all accounts, like, sort of a starter, kind of a pretty good sixth man, just completely changed the entire fabric of this team after the trade. I mean, it's just, it really, like, it is straight out of a movie, dude. Like, nothing that happened this season makes any sense at all. Just completely caught lightning in a bottle. But within this offense, I think it's sustainable because the guards are so empowered. I mean, the Mavs give more freedom and kind of ask their guards to do more heavy lifting than any other team in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
And Dinwiddie loves that. So I mean, he's a perfect fit for what they're going for. It's just I did not expect it to work out that well, obviously, but I do want to push back a little bit though, in that the big kind of resounding common opinion at the time was that it lowered the Mavs' ceiling.
Yes.
And I argued against that because, we'd already seen them in the playoffs 2 years in a row and they lost. So like the ceiling couldn't be any lower. I guess the ceiling would be just don't make the playoffs at all. So, I mean, literally it did not lower their ceiling. And then also it was just like, I mean, it's worth a shot, because what they've tried so far didn't work. So at least they tried something different,
Well, and so I remember thinking, okay, this is a step back to take a step forward because I lived in Washington, D.C., and I know a lot of Wizards fans who are like, this dude bad. And, and frankly, it just wasn't the case. And my favorite thing about him, and I'm curious for your reaction to this, his wingspan. I do not remember the Mavericks having a guard like this in my hardcore fandom over the last 15 years because his ability to just go towards the rim, and guys don't seem to realize how long his arms are. And so he holds onto the ball a little longer and then draws a little more contact and then finishes at the rim. He's just I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens with one more year of knee rehab.
Yeah, I mean, you think back to like, okay, Monte Ellis, Jalen Brunson, even Parsons, who was big, but his wingspan, he might have even had like a negative wingspan, Parsons. I don't remember how long his arms were. I mean, and Luka, I'm not sure Luka's got a monster wingspan either, but I mean, Dinwiddie is like 6'5", 6'6", and has these big, like, swooping drives to the basket where he brings the ball way out while also, he kind of does like the Harden, like, rip through thing, sort of, but also not really. He just kind of goes up hard. It's really impressive to watch. And like you said with the ACL, I think he's only going to get a little more explosive, which is nice because, sometimes he would leave his feet and just wouldn't kind of get enough vertical burst to really make something happen. But I mean, my God, if he gets any more I like his free throw rate rivaled like Harden's and Embiid's and Giannis's after the trade deadline. Like he was living at the free throw line. It was amazing. There's nothing else to say. I mean, he just made such a huge impact.
Well, and it was just a lot of fun to watch. And I compared the three guards kind of like it reminded me sort of like a triple option where the Mavericks sort of did the offense, depending on who had the ball the most, was like not dissimilar, but each Luka and Brunson and Dinwiddie each did things so differently that it made the offense very challenging to guard, despite it being kind of obvious what was happening.
Yeah.
Not much time left. I didn't mean to keep it this long, but again, I just like talking happy basketball with you. So the playoffs, I remember feeling a sense of existential dread because Luka obviously got hurt last game of regular season. What are you going to do? Things happen in a basketball game. It is what it is. And then they go play the Jazz, and that was one of the most uncomfortable 6 games series for me. I was like, every game was like nails on a chalkboard. What did you think?
Whenever Luka went down against the Spurs, I had no problem with him being in the game. But I was pissed, dude. I was pissed, thinking like, this is the best season that the team has had in more than a decade. This is finally the year. We knew we were going to play the Jazz. Like, I openly said that if Luka was healthy, I would say Mavs in 5, and that was even being generous. The Mavs might have swept the Jazz. They might not have lost the game if Luka was healthy. But man, once he went down and Brunson stepped up, it is what it is. The Mavs played, I thought, pretty poorly in game 1 of that series and still almost won. And so I came out of that game more confident than I guess many other people did. And then game 2, Brunson had 41 and Maxey hit those threes and it was awesome. And the train started rolling. And again, those games without Luka, in order to win those games, every player needed to play well. You couldn't have just one guy solo. Again, Jalen scored 41 points in game 2, but they would have lost that game if Maxey also didn't career.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Josh Bowe and I just talked about that, where it's like, I think a lot of people found that series like a foregone conclusion. And unless Brunson goes absolutely supernova, he made 6 threes. He didn't make that many threes the whole playoffs. So for him to hit 6 in one game, whoo, brother.
Well, and Maxey in games 2 and 3, I think hit like 13 combined. It just inexplicable hot shooting. And Bertans had a couple moments, and obviously Dorian and Reggie were nails from 3 all series. Everyone needed to step up, and so whenever Luka came back, like, everyone had rhythm, everyone had confidence. It was almost like, I don't know, maybe they should try it again next year, just to force everybody to get rolling. Yeah, the whole thing was just it was a little nervy watching it. The number 1 offense in the NBA just constantly break open threes. You're like, eventually they're going to make them, and they just never did. So thank you, I appreciate that, Utah.
Really unbelievable game plan from the coaching staff that was so well executed. This was the series where Josh did such amazing like post game analysis, like what worked, what didn't, almost every game, and this was a series of execution that I think I will come to appreciate more over time. I was just, when Luka came back game 4, it was a little but sometimes things happen, and then they're on to play the Suns, and the Suns, I don't know if I've told you this, if depending on which shows of ours you've listened to, like, I agreed to get a puppy after the Mavericks went down 0-2 to the Suns, because I was like, okay, we're going to be done. I'm going to have more time. And I did not have more time.
Big mistake, Kirk.
The Mavericks will play basketball for another month. And scientists will be studying that Suns series for some time. There couldn't have been more than 5 minutes of clutch basketball played that entire series.
I don't think there was a single clutch game. Like, I think every game was decided by double figures, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The Mavs made a game of 1 to lose by like 8.
Yeah, but it was something else. I don't remember us. I guess maybe there might have been like Kings Mavs games in the early 2000s that had that kind of like sense of like what it, team gets going, they really get going. But like I still don't know what to make of that series.
There was something happening with Phoenix. I mean, it's not just a Mavs triumph, but I guess no series loss is only, or a series win or whatever, however you want to view it, is only because of the winning team playing well or the losing team playing bad. It's always a combination, but there had to be some stuff going on with Phoenix because, I mean, for them to just go from games 1 through 5, I mean, they, even in the Mavs wins in Dallas, like they still looked good. And then game 6 and 7, they just completely fell apart. I mean, just completely came undone. And
I
some of
think
that
they
was,
lost both games by something like it was something approaching 60 points between
oh
those
yeah,
two games.
and I mean, it would have been more had the Mavs actually played in the fourth quarter of either of those games. I mean, it just complete curb stompings in both games. And the Mavs got red hot from 3, which helps a lot. And Luka figured it out. And I mean, I don't remember exactly what Luka did in Game 6 of the Clippers series in the bubble, but I remember Game 6 last season he was really good. In Game 7, obviously he was amazing. It seems just like as the series goes on, like Luka's gonna know everything that you do to him. Like he's just gonna get better as the series goes on, which kind of feeds into your Derrick Henry thing. Like you're gonna Mikal Bridges, sure, you're awesome. You are gonna be exhausted at the end of this series because Luka's gonna go right at your ass for 7 games. And he's bigger than you and stronger than you and talks more trash than you. And the Mavs are having more fun than you are. I mean, it is mentally and physically and psychologically just exhausting and emotionally too. Luka's a really fiery guy and he complains a lot. I mean, Devin Booker was too busy making fun of Luka to like think about what's going on the court. I mean, Luka just occupies so much real estate in your head and takes so much out of your body that I don't know. I mean, it feels like going 6 or 7 against the Mavs is very hard. It feels like you're better off trying to beat them in 5 like the Warriors did, because otherwise Luka's just going to figure out everything you do and he's just going to toy with you in game 6 and 7.
And he's I don't watching him be that guy was so special. It was so special in game 7, just coming out. And I remember my wife put our son to bed and she comes downstairs and it's like a few minutes before halftime. I tell her the score and she was like, what? Just coming. It was just, I'll remember, like, that's one of those sports moments we'll talk about a long time from now. And that's why I want to do this pod, in the sense of like, you need to remember this because I don't know. I'm sure you see it. You're offline. You're on vacation to a degree, but like it's turned into like every offseason has turned into like the Jalen Brunson wars of people arguing over stuff they have no control over. And as I've aged, I just don't care. Like it's a different deal for me entirely. And it's like I have to find a middle ground of like talking about it and enjoying like elements of it. But like I don't want to fight over things I can't control.
Remind yourself of that on July 7th whenever they've split the mid-level exception between like 3 players.
Fair, but you know what? It's so when you get to the Western Conference Finals and you look at how they did it, and you say, okay, was there some injury luck? Sure. I don't really want to talk about the Warriors series because I think that it's relatively recent. We know what happened. I think a couple of games could have swung differently. I really wish they would have attacked Jordan Poole. That's neither here nor there. But it's like when you get to the Western Conference Finals with a let's just call it a short bench to be respectful, you see a path. And so let's say the Mavericks don't do anything different. Let's say they roll out this exact same team and they get 1/8 man for the mid-level, for part of the mid-level exception. I don't know. I might be okay with this because the process is there. Like we're going to have to figure out this Reggie Bullock can't shoot the first 3 months of the season thing, because as you know, it's not a recent thing. Like it's his career. He's like an upward trajectory guy, but these feel like fixable things because you want to be playing your basketball at the best time of the year. I think if the Mavericks had played the Warriors in the second round, they would have beat the Warriors because the Warriors were not playing their best basketball. The Mavericks were. And I just feel at the moment, I feel really good about where things are. That can change because you're never, the window for to be a competitor is never as long as you think it is. Though Dirk Nowitzki sort of bent our reality on that one. I feel good, and I hope you do too.
I feel great, man. And continuity is always good. especially at the start of the season. They're not going to next season. They're not going to have to be figuring anything out. They're not going to be playing a new defensive system. Sure, they'll probably have a few new players or whatever, but like it's a whole lot easier to integrate a couple new guys than it is to like for the entire team to learn a new playbook at both ends. And it's been a while since they've gotten off to a good start. I mean, they were below 500 on New Year's Day each of the last 2 seasons, and that makes the back half of the year a grind. So get off to a better start. You can take some time off in March and get ready to go for April. I mean, don't be chasing the rest of the season. And so if continuity is the best way to get off to a better start, then I'm all for it.
So before you go, and we're almost at the end of our time here, you did a lot of stuff this year, and it's the sort of stuff where you and Katya are, I think you guys are testing, you're figuring out what works and what didn't. Could you tell the folks what you worked on this year, and also what you're kind of hoping to carry over into the next season? Because I don't know, I made you guys part of my morning most days of the week. It was great, put me in a great mood. So let's talk about it real quick.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, so this past season, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, which I know is kind of a weird time for people that live in the States, but we don't do anything live for our friends in Europe, and so I feel like we owed them one. That's not at like 5 a.m. their time. We stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Dallas Mavericks in Studio 41, which is a little tiny room in the back corner of our office that Jason Chenik, this guy that works with us, was able to turn into a real live studio. And we got proper cameras and desks and equipment and tech and everything in there. And it's great. I mean, we stream on Twitch. We just have fun. This year was kind of beta testing, like you said, just to figure out how everything works and what we're capable of doing, like technologically capable of. And going into next season, we're going to continue doing that morning show. I think it's called Morning with the Mavs. We're just hanging out, drinking coffee, talking about whatever, talking about the games last night. But we also want to start introducing more, more programming at different times of day. And then also, more polished content that we can put on YouTube, things like the film room, which I was doing during the playoffs.
That was good stuff.
Film
Love
breakdown.
that stuff.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Doing that and just more kind of more stuff like that. And I really like the live aspect too. I mean, we're seeing it. You do the Spotify lives, and Twitter Spaces are popping off too. They're just going crazy. TV and even podcasts. Like I love podcasts, but TV and podcasts and radio are such a passive experience as the consumer, because
Sure.
You present someone the content and they listen to it and that's it, or they watch it and that's it. But when you do it live, you can interact with people and you can really get a feel for what people want to hear and what people want to know, and you can tell stories and you can really entertain people and have fun live with a big group. So we're going to start pushing it more, promoting it more now that we kind of know how it works, and implement some new things too. So it's gonna be a lot of fun, and that starts on draft night. We are doing a draft night show, whether the Mavs keep their pick or trade it or whatever. We are going to be streaming the entire first round of the draft on our Twitch channel and also on our YouTube. So if I could plug that would be fantastic. And it's gonna be a good time. Last year there was more than 2,000 people watching at its peak, so it was a really big show and it was a lot of fun.
Well, good, man. I enjoy participating in it. I know what you mean in terms of the interactivity. It's why I really like these green rooms. It's taken, or it's not Spotify Live, but it's taken the post game people getting pissy on Twitter and all social media, message boards, whatever you want to call it. And basically, because there's a tonal difference when you're typing versus talking. You and I know this from some of our debates, let's just call it, over the years. And I really, it's just been much more fun to talk to people, and then you realize, like, number one, it's not all that serious, and number two, there's always another game.
Yeah, well, and like, dude, I've made friends. There are like Wolves fans and Pacers fans and Magic fans and Grizzlies fans that watch us on Twitch. Like, there's people from all over the country because no other team does it. So it's just fun to get to know people from different cities, different backgrounds, different countries, whatever. It's been great. I love it.
Good, man. This has been fun. I always love talking to you. You guys, you should follow Bobby and not tweet stupid things to him. And check out all the stuff at Matt. Like, Bobby's sort of underselling like what they did, but the Mavericks as a team have really turned a lot of stuff. Like, there was the Mark Followell, Brian Damaris podcast, which they went sort of public from behind a paywall, which is two guys who just know, like they bring a lot of experience to the table. of seeing things and of really, I enjoyed listening to them. It was really good stuff. Made that part of my rotation. And again, just there's a lot of Mavs content out there. And I think, you go through the hard times to be able to enjoy it when it's fun. And so the Mavs do a really good job of sort of leveraging that, I think, because it's kind of a negative sports culture these days, and you gotta enjoy it where it is. But again, Bobby and I's recording thing is about to die, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you go, Bobby. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Okay.
Hey, thank you, Kirk. Appreciate you, man.
All right. Talk soon.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.